Hello and welcome everyone, my name is Dizzy and I am back with you to do another Game of Thrones A Song of Ice and Fire chapter. And it's been a while, I've been on vacation, I've been in Taiwan for the last couple of weeks, I got back about a week ago. And I figured I'd pick this back up. And we're in the first Jon chapter, which is pretty uneventful in terms of like story progression, but it does provide a lot of perspective from Jon's POV, which is pretty cool. And what I love about Jon chapters is the transformation. I love how he kind of starts as a very morose, sort of taciturn, and very standoffish, like child, like 14 years old, early adolescence. But several choice encounters change his whole arc, and he's smart enough to take the people's advice who give it to him. And this is one of those at the very end. Now, the first part of this chapter is very cozy. It starts in the Great Hall of Winterfell. Jon is at the welcoming feast for King Robert, and he is sitting with the commoners and soldiers. And he is thoroughly enjoying himself because he is drinking basically an unlimited amount of wine. This is an open bar sort of situation. So Jon, at 14 years old, is enjoying a very nice wine buzz. And he doesn't have to keep up the appearance of being a Stark, since it would be a grave insult for him to sit with the royal children, mostly due to the Queen and Catelyn Stark. I think Eddard could care less, and Robert could care less, because Robert's probably drunk. But he is forced to sit with the commoners and soldiers, which doesn't bother Jon, because he can do basically whatever he wants down there. And he says this is one of the few times he actually enjoys being lowborn, or illegitimate born. And he also enjoys their company more than he would probably the royal offspring. And we learn why, because he gets an impression from his POV of the royal family as they walk by him. He's sitting right in the aisle, so they ended up walking right by him. And he thinks Queen Cersei is very beautiful, but he also sees her as very fake. He sees the smile she's wearing as a facade, and that she's actually really not happy to be there. And he is disappointed with King Robert because he essentially was told all these stories about how he was so great and how he was like this 6'6" tall monster on the battlefield and best friend to Ned and a legendary warrior, and all he sees is a fat, sweaty drunk who's sweating through his small clothes. So, and we also get the first impression of Princess. We also get the first impression of Princess Marcella as she's walking with Robb. And Jon sees her as dim-witted and insipid because she's looking at Robb in a very flirtatious way, I guess, however flirtatious an 8-year-old can be. And because of that, probably because Jon is jealous, he sees her as insipid, which is not true. So that's one case where his perception is wrong, because Marcella is not stupid. And as we go further along, we will learn more and more about that. She's actually probably the smartest out of all three of the children. She's probably smarter than Cersei is for that matter, but never mind. Won't get into that. And we see Prince Joffrey. He is very handsome, very tall, but Jon also sees him as having a very pouty look and looking very effeminate or whatever, I guess. We also see Jaime Lannister, who is the most interesting to Jon because he is tall, he is handsome, he is in shape, like the way he walks, the confidence he exudes. He's a true warrior. And Jon's like, this is what a king should look like. This is what a lord should look like. But we also know that Jaime is called Kingslayer behind his back. And that's the first reference to that. And we see Tyrion Lannister walking next to Jaime. And Tyrion is a short, waddling, ugly dwarf with a big head and like blonde white hair. So not a very favorable first impression of Tyrion Lannister from Jon's POV. That'll change. Jon is enjoying himself at the feast, becoming progressively more and more buzzed, and to the point of basically being pretty drunk, to be honest. And his uncle Benjen walks up and sits next to him. Benjen is a ranger of the Night's Watch. He is in all black, although black velvets. He's dressed very nicely. He's got his black velvet dress clothes on, his Night's Watch special occasion clothes on. And Benjen is described as hard-featured and fierce-looking, but also having a very jovial, like, playful side to him, which is kind of interesting considering Ned. Ned is very intense, where Benjen is also intense, but also has a fun-loving side to him. Conversation is cordial at first. I think we'll skip ahead. And they just have basic small talk. Jon's wolf is with him at the table, and Benjen's like, oh, that's one of the legendary dire wolves. That's cool. And we talk about the wolf a little bit. And Jon also makes some very keen observations about the queen being upset, about Robert being drunk, and just very perceptive notes on things. And Benjen looks at him and says, you know what, you're really sharp. We could use you in the Night's Watch. And Jon just says, oh my gosh, that's what I've been wanting to do. I'd love to be in the Night's Watch. I'm prepared. I'm a good fighter. I know how to ride a horse, and I know how to use a sword. And Benjen says, that's all good and dandy, but there's more to it than that, and you're going to give a lot up by doing that. But Jon is stubborn and drunk and is like, listen, I'm almost a man grown. I'm ready to do this. Who are you to tell me otherwise? And, you know, illegitimate born sons grow up faster than others, or bastards grow up faster than others. And Benjen's like, yeah, that's true, but, like, why don't you, like, get with a woman and enjoy some of the things of youth and early adulthood before you have to give it all up? And Jon just gets extremely upset about this, thinks that Benjen is, like, hurting his honor, or insulting his honor. And this is where Jon is really prickly. And he, like, gets up, but he's drunk, and he, like, bumps into a serving girl and knocks over a bunch of, like, booze all over the place. A bunch of people laugh, and Jon, like, storms out embarrassed, and he starts crying. And you're like, oh, well, that's kind of a weird thing for him to cry about. All he did was, you know, just knock a drink over. But it's actually because he's ashamed of being bastard born, and we learn that he's very prickly about that. And as Jon leaves, he meets a very interesting character, because he walks through the door and somebody says, hey, boy, and he's like, well, where's that coming from? And he sees Tyrion Lannister sitting on top of the door to the Great Hall. And Jon's like, what are you doing up there? And Tyrion's like, well, it's too hot and stuffy in there, and I'm drunk, so I thought I'd come out here to get some fresh air, which is very relatable. As someone who hates hot, stuffy rooms, I wouldn't want to be in that room either if I was Tyrion. He's probably just enjoying the night. It's a crisp evening, and he's enjoying himself. Jon's like, well, how are you going to get down from there? And Tyrion's like, watch this. And he does a cartwheel and does a flip, which, like, surprises both Jon and Ghost. And you wouldn't expect that from a lordling, too. And Jon's like, what the heck is that? Where the heck is this guy? And Tyrion's like, yeah, I know. That's impressive. Can I pet your wolf? Which shows that Tyrion's really not too afraid of much, despite being a dwarf. And Ghost lets him pet him after a minute. And Tyrion looks up at Jon and says, oh yeah, you're Ned Stark's bastard, aren't you? And Jon goes, like, tight-lipped and, like, white in the face, and Tyrion's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend, but you are a bastard, right? And Jon's like, yes, Ned Stark is my father. And Tyrion still recognizes that Jon's upset about that. And one of my favorite quotes comes up right after this. Tyrion looks at Jon and says, let me give you some counsel, bastard. Never forget what you are, for surely the world will not. Make it your strength, armor yourself in it, and it could never be used to hurt you. And Jon just kind of looks at him and says, what do you know about being a bastard? And Tyrion looks at him and says, all dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes. And what I love about that exchange is so much is said and so little. And after this moment, Jon isn't nearly as prickly about being called a bastard. And we also learn that Tyrion is very silver-tongued, and his words cut to the chase. He's very direct, and very cutting, but he's also not entirely a mean person. He's got a sense of humor. But he's still kind of untrustworthy because he's a Lannister. But anyway, that's how the chapter ends. This is another dialogue-heavy chapter, as most of the first ones are. And it's really fun to see the characters through Jon's eyes, because Jon has his own perspective. And Jon is also a flawed character. Very flawed in this. He's very prickly and sensitive. But I mean, he has a reason to be. Because he has that Stark sense of honor and that stubbornness, right? I mean, I guess not. The Tullys are known for their stubbornness, but he has that prickliness that the Starks kind of had, that uprightness. And Tyrion kind of breaks that down and sees it for what it is, and even says, you look like a Stark. And yeah, Tyrion's intro is epic, by the way. But yeah, not a whole lot of plot advancement, but a lot of dialogue and a lot of nuance here. And I guess that's all I have for that chapter. Not too much. Hopefully this was short and sweet, and thank you for watching, and I'll be sure to post more of these. Peace.